Welcome to the Public Safety Innovators Podcast. Connecting you with trendsetters who are leading innovation in public safety and expert advice on growing your own post-law enforcement business. And now, your host, Adam Wills.
Thanks for joining me for episode 32 of the Public Safety Innovators Podcast. This is kind of a fun episode because my guest today is the unseen hero behind the Public Safety Innovators Podcast, my podcast manager, James Healy. Today we're going to talk about why he and I both believe that podcasting for public safety agencies is a largely untapped market that you and your agency should be getting involved in. And for the copreneurs listening to the show, we are also going to discuss just how powerful podcasting can be for growing your own business. So let's quit wasting time here and jump into my interview with the man, the myth, and almost a legend, James Healy. James, welcome to the Public Safety Innovators Podcast. It's great to have you on.
Hey, thanks, Adam. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so this is kind of a fun episode because many people don't realize, but you are kind of like the unseen brains behind the Public Safety Innovators Podcast.
I guess so. Yeah, it's been fun working with you on it and helping you, first of all, just helping you start it. And you were doing it all on your own, and then it quickly grew and you got a little overwhelmed and you're like, help. And so I've jumped in and been helping you out with it. And it's great. I love the content. I love what you're doing with it and how it's growing. It's really fun. I love doing the podcasting thing too. So.
Well, not to stoke your ego too much or anything, but truthfully, I feel like the audience needs to know that if it wasn't for James, this podcast would really not be around right now, certainly not in its current state, because James is my podcast manager for the Public Safety Innovator Podcast. But more importantly than that, you helped me come up with the concept. I kind of came to you with this jumbled thought mess of ideas, and I really didn't have any format to it, and you helped me come up with a way to create a format for the show. And so you truly are the reason why the show is in its current state.
Oh, thanks. Well, it's been a great collaboration. I think we work well together, brainstorming ideas and coming up with concepts and trying some. A lot of them work, some don't, but that's the way it goes.
Yeah, we've made some adjustments along the way, haven't we, too?
You got to do that in business and in life. That's how it goes. So,
yep. Well, today we've got you on the show. We're going to talk about podcasting kind of in general, the power of podcasting, if you will, and how to leverage podcasting. We want to kind of break that down into two areas and talk to both law enforcement administrators here that are listening to the show and how law enforcement agencies or even public safety agencies in general can leverage podcasting. And then we're going to talk to the business owner entrepreneur here as well and talk about those concepts too. So let's start to unpack this idea of how podcasting can be used in the public safety sector.
Yeah, you and I have talked about this a little bit in the past, and I've definitely thought about it myself. And podcasting has come on definitely a little stronger in this last year during the pandemic, I think, where people have a little more time to focus on different digital things, whether they're on social media more or getting into podcasting, of course, meeting through Zoom or whatever it is. But podcasting is basically, it's like on-demand radio, and you can have your content coming out through a podcast that is hosted for free on all kinds of different platforms. It can be heard around the world, and it can be a great way to communicate any sort of message that you might want to get out there. And it can be kind of a narrow cast. I think we've talked about this before. It's not so much broadcasting like national radio or national TV is going everywhere on cable or whatever. It's just going to a core group of listeners or people, and those people can be in your local community, right? Like you can have kind of a local podcast that is speaking to a local community, or like you've done with your podcast, you're speaking to a kind of a specific group of people in law enforcement and military, public safety space, firemen, and people. I think law enforcement agencies could tap into that, and I know some have. There are some law enforcement podcasts out there, and they are using that to either monthly or every other week or whatever it is. And most of the time podcasts go weekly, but sometimes that can be a lot of work to put together every week. But to put out some
it
sort
is a lot of work.
some sort of bulletin or newsletter or message to the community, and it doesn't have to be
Everybody
just
needs a
news. It can be fun things.
Yeah.
I'm here in little Bozeman, Montana, town of about 50,000 people. The valley itself is about 100,000. And every day in the newspaper, they have a section with the police report. And, they tell how many calls the police got and the sheriff's office got. And then they highlight about 8 from each department. And they highlight the ones that are entertaining, right? And it's Montana, so it'll be 12 bison were on the highway and blocking traffic or something like that, So it's just a way to...
They make good hamburger.
It's a way for those police reports to kind of give a chuckle and show that the police department, the sheriff's office, they're real people, and they're dealing with these kind of goofy calls all the time. And it's just one way to keep them top of mind as well. And I think you could intersperse some of those kind of segments into a podcast, because podcasting and using radio or voice is a highly emotional, empathic way to communicate with people. When people listen through their headphones or their earbuds and they're not watching a video, their minds actually can understand more emotion than you can watching a video. It's this weird thing. They've done studies. I could put this in the show notes. There's a link to a study they did at Yale. They conducted 5 different experiments to show that audio and audio alone had more emotional connection, because when you're using your brain, just like a computer is using more than one program at one time, if your brain is doing that, then it has to kind of scale its energy resources to different things. If you're only using your audio, your ears, you can actually hear emotions in that sort of thing. That's why they've always said, if you're on you're in the marketing on a sales call or something, to smile when you're on the phone, people can hear you smile, right? Or how radio shows back in the day were so engaging for people, and to the point where people believed the War of the Worlds it was a real thing because it sounded so real. It really got people into it. There was so much emotion into it. So I think there's a lot of ways that public safety could communicate with their local community. I got one more quick answer. I know I'm rambling a little bit here, but a quick example. So we had a big forest fire here just outside of town last summer. The mountains fire just blew up in an afternoon, and it went down the other side of the mountains. It burned down a bunch of homes. The whole valley had to be evacuated. And there was a Facebook page that for communicating what was happening around that fire. And it was a community page, and it grew to like 13,000 people in 6 to 8 hours, right? Like because that's where everyone was getting their real time information. And so the sheriff's department and the police and the fire department, the National Forest Service, that when they were giving their press briefings, they were live streaming it on that page because it had such a big audience. So there's a way to communicate some of those kind of emergency situations or real-time events as well, because you can live stream a podcast and people can listen to it anywhere. They can listen on their smartphones, in their cars now. Cars have podcast players a lot of times. It's just a really easy way to tap into some of the news of what's going on too. So
right, absolutely. I mean,
right
yeah, podcasting, I don't think it's certainly not a good way to get like happening now information out there, right? Like you said, there's other channels that are more appropriate for that. But I do think that there's some proactive ways in which podcasting can be used. And so I want to kind of break a mindset barrier here real quick, because I think part of the challenge in why this concept hasn't been adopted by public safety organizations, and more specifically law enforcement up to this point. And I've talked about this on the show before. We have this old order, that's the way we've always done it kind of mentality in law enforcement. And it's very traditional, which is a good thing. But I like to break that mentality of that's the way we've always done it. And I think podcasting truthfully does not get enough credit. And I think there's this assumed thought of, is there really an audience for me? And so with that said, I want to share something here real quick. These are some statistics from April of this year. So right now, these are current statistics. There are over 2 million different podcasts currently, with over 48 million episodes total. It says here that 75% of the U.S. population is familiar with the term podcasting. Over 50% of all U.S. homes are podcast fans. And over 37%, which is 104 million people, listen to podcasts at least every month. So there's certainly an audience there. And I've always said, and this is part of what got me into podcasting, it really doesn't matter what your niche is and what your podcast is about. Guarantee you there is an audience for it in the world of podcasting.
Right. And like I was saying, it's because you can speak to a very narrow audience, a very specific group of people, whether it's in a community or within a niche or an interest group, right? Like if you're really into, you're a grizzly bear researcher, you're in Montana, you have a podcast on that. I don't know if there is a podcast on that, but you could probably have one, and you would have an audience of the other 300 bear researchers around the world who would, listen to everything you're putting out there. I have a 7-year-old, I know you have kids. He loves stories podcasts, right? And because kids love stories are super engaging. And these kids stories podcasts have big audiences, and they can have an audience of kids aged 3 to 6, and you can have kind of specific stories for that group, and you're just always going to have a bunch of people listening to that. I think the local kind of more community-based podcasts are something that's a little newer, and we're starting to see more of those. I'm helping some people start some of those in all kinds of different industries, but they can help people in their local communities with different problems, and then be seen as kind of that local expert and guide and the local authority on whatever it is. And yeah, like I said, the big part of brand, your brand building, whether you're a public safety professional or a department, police department, you've got to protect your brand as well, or a business, is communication, and open and consistent communication with your audience and the people that are listening to you. And I'm sure that's why that little bit in the newspaper has been running, for well over 30 years. Like, it's been going every day in the paper because that's how they can consistently communicate kind of what's going on. Um, you know,
But think
and it
about how
gives them
much more engaging and entertaining those stories would be if they actually were, explaining those on a
yeah,
podcast, right? You could hear the
yeah,
people
you
saying,
could,
here's what happened. And maybe the officer comes on and actually shares his story about what exactly happened,
yeah, exactly. I mean, you can create a whole story out of these little 2-sentence reports, right? Like,
Yeah.
I saw I saw one the other week. It was like, some woman called because she found a gun in the back seat of her car. She had no idea who it was, right? And then the very next line was like, some kid came into to the station because his friend's mom turned in his gun that he left in the back of his car or something, right? Like, he had accidentally left the gun in the back of the mom's car, and she didn't know whose it was, turned it in. He had to go fess up to the officers and everything. So, I mean, there's a story behind that. It'd be kind of fun to tell. There are a lot of those examples.
Yeah. Well, and when I was under sheriff, the sheriff and we used to go into the radio station a couple times a month, and we would
Yeah.
get on the air, and we would have, it depends. It depended upon what was going on and how much time there was available to us, but we'd spend an hour or half an hour at least on the air, just talking about what sort of cases we've had recently, what sort of things the
Yeah.
community needed to keep an eye on, if there was an increase in, motor vehicle thefts in a certain area, or
Sure.
whatever type community programs or upcoming events we had going on. We were able to talk about those things. And I mean, obviously that translates really well into a podcast. And it just seems so obvious to me. I wish there was more law enforcement agencies doing this.
Oh, it does. And so many people used to do those radio shows. I don't know that a lot of people do anymore. And not a lot of people are tuning into the radio as much as they
No.
used to, I don't think.
Everybody's
right?
on Spotify.
They're on Spotify or maybe Sirius or something. I don't know, but they're listening to something else. Because those AM stations or the small local radio stations used to always have those extra little spots available. But again, you had to haul your butt down to the station and get there and sit down and do all of that. Whereas with a podcast, right, that we're sitting here in our home offices, able to connect and record, and then we can schedule it when it goes out, and then it's available. It's always available 24/7 for people to listen to. It's not just when it's on air, coming out of the radio station. So, yeah, I actually was listening to some of the podcasts of some of the police departments around the country, and a lot of them were doing exactly what you're saying, providing a lot of those event information about events, even when they're like, we have job openings. If you're interested in joining a department, we're down some people. All kinds of different ways to update the community, because things can be seasonal too, right? You're going to see different things, different times of year that you want to, you just reminding people about. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I obviously the podcast has done good things for me, and maybe maybe I just need to be a little bit transparent in this podcast and share some of my experience, because obviously we want to talk a little bit here on the show as well about how businesses, and more specifically the copreneur that's listening to this show can leverage podcasting either to grow their business, or even, I would argue, pre-business, right? Like
Mhm.
before you even have a formalized business plan and you're actually taking people's dollars in exchange for a product or service, I think podcasting, because as you and I know, you're a fellow StoryBrand certified guide. So that's how
Mhm.
we connected. Value is first, right? We want to deliver
Right.
value. And if you can deliver content that is valuable to an audience to prove your authority and demonstrate the legitimacy of a concept, then
Mhm.
you are going to have a much greater chance at launching a business off of that when the time comes. And so share with me some of your experiences, what you've seen, the successes you've seen from clients that you've worked with, and being able to start or grow a business because it was piggybacking on podcasting.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're exactly right. It's a huge authority builder, and it's a way for you to communicate with an audience that might be prospects, your possible customers, and hear directly from them what their problems are and how you can help them, right? Because you can ask them to email you or call a number or whatever it is when you are talking about a certain topic, or if they have questions about something, you can get feedback. Just like old radio shows used to have the call in number, right? And people would call in with their problems, and the doctor would answer their questions or whatever show it was, right?
Right.
And I think it's a way for people to then flesh out ideas. I have a podcaster right now. She has basically organized an entire book, right? And she's kind of uh, outlined it and has all of the ideas on it. And so she's taking that outline and putting it out there as a podcast first so that she gets feedback from people on the content for that book so that she can refine it. So when she writes the book, it's an even better book. And both of having a podcast and a
That's a
book are
brilliant
like a
idea.
double whammy for uh, boosting your authority in today's world. I know I do a little book publishing too, right? The books have always been shown to have more uh, credibility boosting power than a master's degree, right? So, because most people don't
Hmm.
ever ask you where you went to school or where you got your degree or any of that sort of thing. You either got your authority because of your title, who you've worked with, or if you're an author or now a podcaster. And that's how people are going to introduce you if you're a speaker at an event or something, right? They're going to introduce you as an author of a book or a host of a certain podcast, or they've worked with these brand name companies that someone might recognize or something like that, right? Those are the things that are going to give you the status in the audience's eyes. So yeah, the idea of
Yeah,
working
I
through a
really like
book,
that idea.
and I've seen, you found a lot of success because you've been able to adapt and adjust your idea around what you're offering and who you're helping by having the podcast, right? Like by talking to the people you interview and then talking to the people who respond and the listeners who are reaching out to you, and you're inviting them to do that. And it's helping you really refine your purpose and what you're going to be doing moving forward with your business. And I think for someone, especially who's just starting out, it's a way to get that, um, basically by just getting a little bit of equipment and putting some time into it. You can do it yourself, and there's courses to help you. And I did some coaching programs that helped Adam start. But uh, yeah, it's available, right? It's available to us all. All you need is you don't even need a nice mic like this. You just need a decent mic and a laptop, and you're good to go.
Yeah, truthfully, I mean, the upfront investment is insignificant in comparison to what you gain out of it. Because, like you said,
Hmm.
this has really helped me refine my purpose in my business. Like you said, because when I left my law enforcement career, I ventured out in a completely different direction than what most cops do, right? Most cops end up,
Right.
going into being a private investigator, private security, corporate security, that sort of stuff. And web design had always been a passion of mine. It was a hobby. And so I stepped out and was like,
Right.
I started this business working as a marketing strategist and a web designer. And I was working really with any client that had the budget to work with me that I thought was a good fit, regardless of their industry and what they were selling. I would work with, and there was this light bulb moment that went off
Right.
for me back last summer. Last summer, I had a client that was in the public safety space. They were selling a product that was for law enforcement, and there was a
Right.
light bulb that went off in my head because I was like, wait a second. I know exactly how to help them because I was an administrator and I know exactly how to market to that person because I know what problem they're
Right.
facing and how to communicate to them, and so anyway, through that, I realized these are the people
Yeah.
I want to work with more companies in the public safety space. And that was where I
Mm-hmm.
formed the idea of, hey, maybe I should try podcasting. It seems like everybody's having success with podcasting right now. But I almost talked myself out of it
Yeah.
because I
Sounds like.
thought, yeah, I was like, surely there's not an audience for that. Surely there isn't, and it's not going to work
Right.
out.
Yeah.
And we tried it anyway, and the
Mm-hmm.
response has been phenomenal. I mean, there are the followership for the show has been awesome. It has helped me grow my business, and specifically working with both companies that are in the public safety space, but also this unintentional audience kind of appeared out of nowhere, and that was what I call the copreneur. And it's all
Yeah.
these cops like me that
Yeah.
were starting their own businesses. And so it's just my own personal testimony to how powerful
Yeah.
podcasting can be to your business. And does it take some of my time? Yes. Have I spent a good chunk of money to be able to run this podcast and grow it and
Right.
do it right? And hiring a James to edit it and run it for me? Yes, but it is it's been a worthwhile investment for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Going back to what you're saying about you weren't sure if there was an audience big enough. I would say any group that has like any sort of conferences or get-togethers are used to, pre-pandemic, that kind of thing, and we'll probably have them again, or has some sort of magazine dedicated to that industry-wide magazines or anything like that. There's definitely going to be a big enough audience that's going to listen to a podcast. And there are interest groups that have all kinds of special magazines and get-togethers and everything from, computer coders to Trekkies and Star Wars fans or something. I don't know. I'm sure there are podcasts for Star Wars fans. That's guaranteed. And going back to that number, of 2 million podcasts. Now it sounds like there's a lot of podcasts. 2 million is nothing compared to how many blogs. Now that was a way for people to express their authority and expertise without having to write a book, right? You could start a blog pretty quickly and easily. And I think there are well over 350 million, blogs, probably more. Not all are active. And it's the same thing with the podcast. With those 2 million, I think there are it's still only about 800,000 that are active on a regular basis. There are a huge number that were actually started during the pandemic that only have one episode. So someone, a lot of people
really?
had the idea that we're gonna start this podcast, and they go through the process of putting something together, and then they lose steam pretty quickly.
Yeah.
The average is you have to
May
get
as well
at
do
least
something
like
while I'm
7
sitting in my
episodes
basement in
together,
quarantine.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
You have to get your systems figured out, and that can be the trickiest part, I think, is like getting a system and a routine around it. But I think within the public safety space, a lot of those guys are used to systems and getting things done efficiently because they have to. It's part of their job all the time, right?
Yep. So let's say I'm a law enforcement agency or a copreneur that wants to start my own podcast. What do I focus on, right? Because like you said, I think we have a tendency to overcomplicate it, right? People think, oh, I've got to buy this huge expensive microphone and I've got to buy all this. I've got to have a sound like a professional studio. And so why don't you, can you just be realistic with the audience and tell them, if you want to get started, what do you really need? What do you actually need?
Yeah, I mean, as far as equipment goes, you really, like you said, you really only need a decent USB microphone, which is going to cost you about $100 or less. That can plug right into your computer. There's free software to record. System we're using right now has a free option. You can record on Zencaster for free if you're doing interviews. There's software on your computer usually. If you have a Mac, there's GarageBand. It's not super great for editing, but it'll get the job done, and you can record on there if you're just recording pieces. There's free music you can find in different places if you're looking for background music or intro music or that sort of thing. But even if you're going to pay for a licensed piece, it's probably only going to cost you $19 or something that you can use. And other than that, some headphones, maybe earbuds, sometimes is nice to have when you're doing interviews or that sort of thing, recording and playing back and editing. And then some sort of either a course or training or something that's going to help guide you through that. And I'm sure you can find a course. What's that going to run? $700 or something for a decent course out there. I don't have a course myself, but I do the group coaching. Every once in a while we run a cohort and help people set up. And that can be helpful because you get a lot more. It's a smaller group, right? Like 6-8 people at the most. And then you're going to get feedback. And I think that's what really helped you is like we got to talk every week about the focus of the show and who your audience was and what your purpose was, how you wanted to help, how you could connect with these people that you wanted to help, right? Because you realized you wanted to help people in the public safety space with their businesses and their marketing and working through that sort of thing. So we decided, well, let's interview them. Then you're going to be able to have the conversations with them. And having the conversations with the people you want to help allows you to then, show your expertise and show how you can help them. So you get to be a mentor and a guide while providing content that's going to help someone else in that same situation, right? Who listens to the show. So I think this is probably one of the biggest things is really you have to start to figure out who you want to help and how you want to help them, or what sort of content, what sort of service and value you want to provide through the podcast. And it's not going to be perfect right out of the gate. I think that's a big hurdle people have too. Like you're saying, people think they need to have all the right equipment. Well, I think sometimes people think they need to have the perfect content. I'm not going to name names, but I know one of our fellow StoryBrand guides has been talking about starting a podcast for over a year and just hasn't pulled the trigger. Probably recorded one episode, but it hasn't gone live. And it's just because they're so worried about it being just right and then the right sequence and everything sounding perfect. And no, you figure it out.
Here's what I've learned about that.
You learn by doing more than anything. Just jumping in, taking action.
Well, and that's just it. You know what?
And then adjusting if you have to.
Every time I've ever thought that what I was setting out to do had to be perfect before I did it. Usually what I found when I got it all together, I'm like, okay, it's perfect now. And now I can do this thing. usually what I discover is that it actually wasn't perfect and I got to change it anyway. And so,
Right.
like you may as well just get started. And, I saw this quote, and I just saw this earlier today. And of course it's already, the exact verbiage has already slipped my mind, but it was something like, getting it done and not having it perfect is better than having it perfect and never seeing the light. Right. And so,
Right.
it's far more effective to just get your ideas together and get started with something, and you just
Yeah.
adjust as you go if you have to,
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
so
And sometimes it's silly things. Sometimes people don't like to hear the sound of their own voice, or they think they're gonna they don't have the old thing where you don't think you have enough expertise to share it out there in the
imposter
world,
syndrome.
right? Yeah. And like a friend of mine used to say, in the valley of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. If there are people out there who know less than you, then you are an expert in their eyes, right? Like you can help someone, and someone above you can help you. And that's sometimes where a podcast can come in handy. If you're doing an interview style, you can interview people who know more than you, and suddenly you're taking your platform and you're learning from it. I've learned so much about your industry by helping you. It's fascinating. It's one of the things I love about podcasting, not just listening to podcasts, but helping people put theirs together, is that I get to learn about all kinds of great different industries. And I guess I'm just a lifelong learner. I love learning, and my brain likes to gather information, that sort of thing. And think about it, talk about it, whatever it is. And it inform you, just a more informed person too. I think the more informed we are in a lot of different aspects. I help you, public safety. I have a podcaster that's into alternative education. So I know all about, and I used to be a teacher. So I'm into like teaching and education and kids, and other podcasters are marketing experts, or therapists, mental health specialists, all kinds of different people. So it really keeps me on my toes and keeps me informed, and I can share that information with people too.
Right. Well, I want to circle back here a little bit to this list and kind of lay it out. So we talked about, if you want to get started in podcasting, you gotta first come up with your format.
Sorry.
No, that's hey, rabbit holes are great. But we want to come up with our format first. So is this a solo podcast? Is this an interview style podcast? Right. I mean, there's several different formats. So put some thought into that first, and then you need a microphone. You need some editing software. You need to come up with some music. We didn't talk about this, but you're going to need to put together show artwork, but that doesn't need to be complex either. I mean, you can use Canva for free, and there's all kinds of templates on there for this exact sort of thing.
I just saw some show artwork for a show today, and simpler is often better. It was like just a green square, black letters, and that was it. No graphics, no images, nothing. It's just saying what the show is, and you want it to be legible. You want to be able to read it when it's small on the phone, right? Like the average size on a phone is like 65 by 65 pixels or something. It's pretty tiny. So you want to be able to at least read the title and have it so people can understand a little bit of what it's about, have it stand out. So you need a little bit of artwork.
A little bit of artwork. You need to have a podcast host to host all of your audio, a place for the audio files to actually live on a cloud server somewhere, so they can be served up to the podcast directories.
So they're served up through what's called an RSS feed, syndication feed. Your website host isn't going to be able to stream audio and serve it up the same way in most cases.
Yeah.
If you had a dedicated
But there's
server,
some
then
decent,
possibly.
well, I shouldn't say decent. There's really good podcast hosts out there that
Oh yeah.
you can get into for as little as like $7 or $15 a month.
Yeah.
Buzzsprout is a big one that a lot of people like and use, and they're pretty affordable. So
yeah, and there are some that offer free plans for you to get started. I think Spreaker has a free plan, allows you to upload a certain number of minutes a month or something, certain number of episodes. I can't remember. But it's a way to get started, and then you can always upgrade to $9 a month or something if you need more space or more episodes. I think they cap it at like 100 episodes. But that's almost, if you're doing it weekly, that's still almost 2 years. By the time you're into it 2 years, you're going to know whether you want to upgrade to the $9 a month.
You'll probably have the budget by then. Yeah.
Hopefully you figured out the budget by then. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think,
let me ask your opinion on something.
$100, you could probably get into it, really, right? A lot of it's just organizing and then taking the action, dedicating yourself. And I can put in the show links a resource for people so they can see all the different steps and the phases, like that, kind of that launch roadmap that we went through, right? And so that kind of gets you to understand the different steps and phases. And again, you're just taking it one step at a time. Do this, do this, do this, and before you know it, you'll get there. Might take you a little longer than some, but that's how it works when you're climbing a mountain. Used to do a lot of that too. One step at a time.
Right. I'm curious to get your opinion.
I used to do like high altitude.
What do you think?
Huh? I'm sorry, I cut you off. I was saying I used to climb.
Okay. I was going to ask what you.
Who's going to edit this part out? No, I used to climb high altitude mountains like Denali and Alaska and that sort of thing. And when you get up towards the top, you're taking a step and then taking like 5 breaths, and then a step and 5 breaths. But as long as you're continuing to move forward, you'll get there. And sometimes putting together a podcast might feel like that. It's just like, oh, I got to do this too. I got to do that. But if you have a checklist and you're moving along, you'll get there.
I would say for me, the first 10 to 15 episodes were the most challenging because it took me about that long to get into a groove. And then I think it was probably around episode 20, maybe somewhere around more like 25 is where you took over with everything. And now I feel great about it. Now it's it's a lot easier to do, and I can just record and say, "Here you go, James. When are you going to have it done?"
Yeah, hopefully sooner than later. Yeah.
So, what's your on kind of going back to this list of what people need to get started? Do you need to have a website? Do you have to have a website in order to start a podcast?
No, you do. You actually do not. Most of those, if you get the hosts,
you're on the same page.
Most of those hosts actually provide you a podcast website.
Yep,
as part of that $7 a month or whatever you're paying. So you're not just getting the podcasting hosting; you're getting a little website that will display the episodes and whatever information you want to put on there. So
yeah,
and
I think eventually.
Yeah, eventually you would want your own dedicated branded website for sure. Yeah. But to start with, you can start scrappy and bootstrap it pretty easily without one.
Yeah. Well, excellent.
Especially if you're just trying to proof of concept. If you're just trying to prove a concept and an idea, you start it for free on one of those free host or whatever it is. Start it for $7 a month. Run it for a few months. Get some feedback. Get some listens. Get some ideas. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, James, you how does somebody get in touch with you if they want to be a part of your group coaching for starting a podcast? And obviously, you probably are available to take on other podcasts for editing and management as well, right? So, how can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, sure. They can go to my website is McLeanMedia.com, MCLEAN media. And then the podcast coaching, there's a little, there's actually like a wait list right now. And trying to pick a date to start that again. But the usual kind of COVID-y stuff has been slowing me down. But it's called podcastlaunchparty.com. So you can go there and sign up and get on the list, and I'll start sending you podcasting tips and ideas, and you can start and you'll get that actual launch roadmap, and you can start filling in some of those thoughts and ideas around your podcast. Like you say, starting to think about your format, who you want to help, how you want to help them, brainstorm some names for the show, research other podcasts in that same industry or niche, see what they're doing. There's nothing wrong with emulating someone who's having success and putting your own personal twist on it. You know, you're still going to find your people, your tribe are going to gravitate towards you. It's one of those marketing things, right? I think you mentioned this recently. It's okay to alienate a certain amount of people as long as you're like appealing to the ones you want to, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So,
yeah. Yep. I want to alienate people. But well, that's awesome. That was, do you have was there anything else you felt like we needed to cover today that we haven't, or do you have closing thoughts you want to share?
Yeah, I would just say one of the other real benefits to podcasting that I find a lot of people don't think about, and sometimes maybe I do because I also record my son sometimes when he's talking, because I'm bad about writing things down in like a baby book or whatever, keeping track. And sometimes because I'm into recording, it's easier for me to record him. But when you are recording a podcast and that sort of thing too, you're creating a bit of a legacy, something that you can go back to years from now or share with someone years from now. It's creating a bit of a record of where you were, what you were doing, and all that sort of thing. And I think that's kind of a really cool thing. A lot of people don't think about that, but after a while, you can go back and listen to it and say, well, that's kind of cool, or share it with your kids when they grow up. They're like, what? You did this? So, you know, we used to record on those
there you go. You heard it here first.
Tape recorders.
Yeah, I used to do that too. But yeah, I guess now I will forever be alive on Apple Podcasts, even after I am no longer here.
Exactly. Still be around. We'll hear your voice.
Well, James, thanks for being on the show. It was awesome having you on. And of course, thank you for everything that you do for the podcast. I can't even tell you enough how much I appreciate you personally, obviously, but I know the listeners do too, because I've gotten a lot of feedback from listeners, and a lot of them say the same thing. They always say, man, the production on your show is just awesome. It sounds great. The audio is always good. And they comment on how much better it is than a lot of other podcasts they listen to. And so you are really the big reason behind that. And so thank you for that. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, you're so welcome. It's a pleasure to help you out with that. And I know you take pride in helping to do those things that make it easier for me to edit and produce a richer sounding show. And you have some pretty cool music too. I like your music.
I dig my music too.
I do too.
Awesome.
right.
Well, as always, folks, we will put links to everything that we talked about here today in the show notes when we put that together. So you can find all those resources there. And of course, James will link to his resources for you if you want to check out the material that he's put together to help you start your podcast. And all that will be in the show notes. So this is episode 32. So you can find all of that by going to psi.chat/032, and everything will be there for you. All right, James, I guess we'll catch you on the backside and we'll talk about editing. Here we go.
Excellent. See you
All
soon,
right.
man.
Bye. Hey, thanks for sticking around till the end of the show. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a review at psi.chat/review. I would love to hear your feedback, and it will also help other public safety innovators like yourself find the show. Be sure to check out the show notes for this episode. Just go to psi.chat, click on episodes, and search this episode number, and you'll find all the links, descriptions, and resources we talked about. And if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe, and you'll be notified when the next episode is live. Thanks again for tuning in, and I'll catch you guys on the next episode.